Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Tadgatram vastu saranam Saubhagasya cha bhajanam Tvagasya sparsha vayoscha Sarvamedhasya chaivahi. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. His bodily surface is the breeding ground for the active principles of everything and for all kinds of auspicious opportunities. His skin, like the moving air, is the generating center for all kinds of sense of touch and is the place for performing all kinds of sacrifice. Purport. The air is the moving agent of all the planets and as such the generating centers for promotion to the deserving planets. The sacrifices are his bodily surface and are naturally the origin of all auspicious opportunities.
Yeah, this section is difficult to translate. You have to translate it. Because it's difficult to understand even in the original. What does it mean that his bodily surface is the breeding ground for the active principle of everything? It's difficult to understand what it means in the first place. The basic understanding is that Krishna is the origin of everything. This chapter, Srila Prabhupada has titled it Purusha Sukta Confirmed. This chapter, it's parallel to the famous Purusha Sukta of the Vedas, in which it's stated how all the different parts of all the necessary ingredients of the universe are generated, and how the presiding deities of all the various manifestations enter into those manifestations. But that still, even after all of this, the Purusha, the form of the universe, did not come to life. But only when Vishnu entered, then everything came to life. Confirming that Jivanam Sarva Bhuteshu, as Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is the living force of all living beings, of all manifestations. One point in the purport here is that Srila Prabhupada states in a matter-of-fact way that the air is the agent by which all the planets move, which is completely against or completely different to the understanding of modern science, which states that the planets move by gravity, and that there is no air in outer space to move all the planets anyway. Modern science is, in the modern world, what is called science is considered to be, is widely considered to be indisputable. And that anyone who disagrees with the verdict of the scientists on such basic facts, the word fact is in quotation marks here, must be crazy.
वो मूर्ख, वो पागल होना चाहिए.
पागल ही है. It's just like there are descriptions of tribes still living in some remote jungles who believe some very primitive idea. Any anthropologists here? Like what, for instance? Actually, when I think of their primitive ideas, they seem to make more sense than that of the modern scientists. So I'm trying to think of some example. That word Adivasi is where did that word come from? I think that's come from the this whole idea of the Aryan invasion theory and all this kind of. Where does that come from? You're an Adi. I mean, you're descended from people who lived in this land since time immemorial. It's just some idea that the Aryans came later or something like this. Original people were the jungle people and all this. Jungle Vasi or something like that.
In Tamil they say Malay Vasi, those who are living on the hills.
Malay Vasi is better because that's more accurate, isn't it? Because the hill dwellers are generally always like that, not very civilized. But it all comes from the idea that originally people were living in the jungles and then they became civilized. Like building oil refineries and developing slaughterhouses and iPods and civilized. Yehi sabhyata hai, aap log to malum nahi, aap sab kya karte ho? Is dehat mein aaya hai aur vidyut bhi istemal nahi karte. Translate that back into English.
You are all uncivilized. What you are doing here? You don't even have electricity, iPod, and you are living in this remote rural area. You are all uncivilized.
That's what these rascals would have us believe. So yeah, the idea that originally man was civilized and civilization has been present in the world for millions of years, as we learn from Shastra. Modern people don't like to accept this. And that the air is the moving agent of the planets. To modern people, this just sounds ridiculous. They say it's due to gravity. So it was a very good theory, it seemed like, when they first came up with it. But after studying the universe more, they found that there wasn't enough matter within it to make everything stay in place, according to their theory. Everyone understand all this? It's pretty high Hindi. Anyway, let's hope they can understand. So now the scientists have come up with the idea that 90% of the matter in the universe is invisible. We can't. It must be there, otherwise there couldn't be gravity, and there must be gravity because the planets are staying in place. So 90% of the matter, we can't see it at all. Now they're trying to prove it. They already know that it's true, but they just haven't seen it yet, so they're trying to prove that it's actually there. It's science, right? It's called science, It's everything's proved, and they say, can you see God? We can't see God, so there's no God, but we can't see the invisible matter, and you're supposed to just believe in it because the scientists said so. But they're scientists, they're sensible people. We don't really prove it, but we'll prove it in the future. Just, you see, we've made so much progress in science. Just like, we discovered so many things, like Professor Einstein made so many wonderful theories, and now the human race is advancing. One little problem came up recently with Einstein's theories. It's all based on the supposed axiom that nothing moves faster than light.
पूरा जो सिद्धांत था उसका आधार था कि कोई भी चीज विद्युत की गति से तेज नहीं चलती है.
विद्युत?
electricity.
Light? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I thought it was light. Or is it all the same?
Oh, yes. Prakash Gati.
But unfortunately for them, they weren't really trying to disprove it, but they happened to find out something which they call a neutrino actually moves faster than light. So this is the way Maya works. People, they're called Panditamani. They think that they're very learned. They think that we really know how everything's going on. Krishna supplies the intelligence to various demons who don't want to see him, by which they can see the world in such a way that their theories to them seem real. But because they're not correct, they're always changing because they find that they're not actually correct. Who could have been more respected than Einstein? But now it's seen that he also didn't know what he was talking about. So, Srila Prabhupada just states this: the air is the moving agent for all the planets, matter-of-factly, because that's the verdict of Shastra. So it is a great task of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness to show that everything in Shastra is correct. Of course, it's difficult to show people who keep their eyes closed. But one factor in favor of the preaching of the devotees from Shastra is that many people in the Western world are disenchanted with modern science and the whole civilization, so-called, based on it.
पाश्चात्य जगत में अधिक मात्रा में लोग तथाकथित कुछ लोग
and actually, at least the kind of people that would even listen to devotees at all, they are willing to accept at least prima facie the statements that devotees make, which go against everything which is supposed to be true according to the modern world. I've had a few interesting experiences in this regard. Yeah, there's no Hindi word for interesting. Once in Dublin, in Ireland, I was giving a lecture in the centre there, and I stated that they haven't gone to the moon, it's all bogus. And after the lecture, one devotee said to me, "Oh, you shouldn't say that. The public, they won't be able to accept that." Members of the public, who are like mostly all newcomers, none of them seemed to have any problem. They didn't protest.
किंतु जो audience श्रोतागण
once in a public, it was like after Rath Yatra in London, in the centre of London, heart of London, in England, I was out there, supposed to be questions and answers. There are all kind of people challenging me and this and that. From the public, there were many challenging people. So eventually I kind of lost my temper. Not fully, but partially. And I said, "You people, you think you're very intelligent and you think you know what's going on, but actually you're all fools. You have no idea about the purpose of life. So from the beginning of your life, you've simply been brainwashed by this modern society by this modern education to think that you're very intelligent, but actually you have no idea of the actual purpose of life," like that. I went on for about 5 minutes like this. And then I stopped and they were all quiet. One person, they'd all been like challenging, and one person said, "He's right." So my point here is that although many of the statements, if not almost all the statements Prabhupada makes, go against everything that is considered correct in modern society. But we should not be afraid to say that the whole society is wrong and Prabhupada is right, Shastra is right, because that's the fact. Okay, so I'll finish there. And unless there are any questions.
These people, when they find out that something what they believed before is now wrong, instead of accepting that actually that's a defeat, they give it a term that's a new breakthrough in the science, like any new discovery. Instead of accepting that actually that proves that they were wrong, they just...
The Prabhupada pointed out, life comes from life, right? That book should be very widely distributed. But in America now, the devotees don't want to distribute that, because many of them don't, because they're mostly distributing on college campuses, and they're afraid that the kids will go and ask their professors, who will give some kind of answer, and then the devotees won't be able to reply to that. I don't know why they're so weak-minded. They think it's all this bogus idea that you can't preach unless you have a college. You can't preach to university students or professors unless you're as educated as them in their own nonsense. But I don't think that's not true. I remember years ago in England, Ravatinandan Swami, he was typical devotee, college dropout, and he was going all over, and that was we only had a few books in those days. He was going all over England to all the universities and challenging on the evolutionary theory and being successful everywhere. At Tribhuvanas, he could hardly read. He was not very educated at all. He joined when he was age 15. And he would go everywhere and preach, but no problem. It's Yasya Deve Para Dev. What is that? Yasya Deve Para Bhakti Yata Deve Tata Guru Tasyaite Katitaryata Prakashante Mahatmana. But we shouldn't be bewildered. At the end of that life comes from life. There's Hansaduta Swami, who's not being bewildered by all the word jugglery of Dr. Kavor. There was Gyanadas from England also. He was on some campus in America, and he was speaking like this openly, and then some professor came along and scolded him and said, with a bunch of hocus pocus words, that you don't know the latest discoveries, this, that. But Prabhupada would cut through all of that by saying, so, can you produce life? He would say like this. There's another incident I heard of in San Diego. Sadar Puta Prabhu was giving a lecture and to the students, and then the professor said afterwards, well, do you know about this? Do you know about this? And he said about some latest discoveries and this and that. But Sadar Puta came right back at him and said, well, yes, okay, but this has been refuted by this and this and that and that. And then the professor just left and said, well, I have some other engagement, I'll come back a little later. So it's good to know all the scientific stuff also, those who can do it. So much work to do in so many fields, to turn over the modern civilization, turn it over and hand it back to Krishna. It's so much work to do. Okay, so for the third time, Hare Krishna.